Hey guys, it's time for yet another edition of the Obscure Window Manager project. The Obscure Window Manager project, for those of you that have not been following the channel, I chose 12 obscure window managers, 12 minimal window managers to review on the channel. I installed all 12 of them on Manjaro's i3 edition, and I have so far reviewed FVWM, JWM, OpenBox, PECWM, Qtile, TWM, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Xmonad. Reading a little bit from their webpage, Xmonad is a dynamically tiling X11 window manager that is written and configured in Haskell. Now that's very important. Haskell, not a lot of people know Haskell. Haskell is kind of a difficult programming language to learn, actually. So that is kind of a barrier to entry for Xmonad. It's what keeps a lot of people away. The other thing that keeps them away is some people don't like having Haskell as a dependency, pulling down the GHC, the Haskell compiler, and all the Haskell libraries just to run Xmonad, because you're probably never going to have another program installed on your machine that runs Haskell. So for some people that's an issue, but these days, when you're talking about many gigabytes, sometimes terabytes of drive space on your machine, a few hundred megabytes of dependencies, not a big deal for most people. Anyway, reading a little more. In a normal window manager, you spend half your time aligning and searching for windows. Xmonad makes this work easier by automating this, because Xmonad is a tiling window manager. A tiling window manager differs from a floating window manager, and that when you open a window, they tile. You open one window, it takes up the full screen. You open a second one, and both windows now take up one half of the screen. You open up a third one, and depending on the layout, they take up exactly 1/3 of the screen. So no windows are ever hidden. No windows are ever stacked on each other. Pretty much all your windows are visible all the time. Looking at some screenshots here from xmonad.org, you see some multi-monitor screenshots here, or not a screenshot, this is an actual photograph of this guy's desktop with a triple monitor setup. I myself actually use a triple monitor setup, and one of the really nice things about Xmonad is that it handles multi-monitors really well by default, without any tweaking. You have more than one monitor, especially if you have 3, 4, or say 6 monitors. Xmonad is really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and log into our Xmonad session here. And after you have installed Xmonad, this is Xmonad out of the box. It's a black screen, or at least some solid color background. You will have no wallpaper, you have no panels, you have no menus, no right-click menu, left-click menu, you have nothing. And if you do not know some of the default key bindings for Xmonad, you really can't do anything here. So you really need to know a few of Xmonad's default key bindings before you log into Xmonad for the first time. For example, how do you quit Xmonad? If you don't know how to, the key binding, and it's a complicated key binding to quit Xmonad, you're going to have absolutely no idea how to even get out of Xmonad. So you're kind of trapped here. So really, if you're doing this in a VM like I am, you probably want to pull up the Xmonad website and go into their documentation. The first page of their documentation here, you see Getting Started. One of the things under Getting Started is the cheat sheet. That is an overview of the key bindings in Xmonad. Also, under Reference, you have the man page here. Of course, you can always view the man page in a terminal, but the man page is also on the website at xmonad.org/manpage.html. And default keyboard bindings. And you see right here, mod shift return launches a terminal. Now, the mod key in Xmonad by default is usually set to the Alt key. So Alt, Shift, and Return, or Alt, Shift, Enter on the keyboard, is the key binding to launch a terminal. Again, that's kind of a complicated key binding too. A lot of times it's just alt return or super return in a lot of tiling window managers. So again, if you don't know the default key bindings for Xmonad, you're not going to have any idea how to launch a terminal. You're not even going to have any idea how to exit out of Xmonad. So make sure you know at least a few of the basic key bindings before you start Xmonad, especially if you're doing this on physical hardware. Because I'm in a VM, I can always just pull a web browser up from my host machine. So I've got this terminal open. To close it, Mod Shift C closes the window. So Alt Shift C. Oh, there it goes. So one more time. Alt Shift Enter opens a terminal. Alt Shift C closes a window that has focus. Now, the Alt key plus P on the keyboard gives us our run command program. This actually launches dmenu. So dmenu. And from here, I could launch anything. For example, I could launch a terminal from here. Just start typing term, and terminal and termite both come up. That launches our termite terminal. And then again, Alt Shift C would close it. Now, let me launch termite again. So Alt P, termite. Now, we should discuss how to install Xmonad on your system. I already had it installed on this virtual machine, but today I'm running Manjaro sudo pacman -S Xmonad. Xmonad is in the repos. For you guys that are on Debian or Ubuntu based distros, sudo apt install Xmonad. Do that in whatever desktop environment or window manager you're currently running. Log out to your login manager and you should see Xmonad in the list of your desktops. So I've already got Xmonad installed, but what I don't have any kind of bar, any kind of panel on the desktop. Now, there's several choices we could make on this, but since I'm doing Xmonad, which is written in Haskell, I want to choose a panel that is also written in Haskell. And the one that a lot of people, probably most people that run Xmonad use, is a panel called Xmobar. So I'm going to sudo pacman -S Xmobre Xmobar. I'm going to go ahead and install Xmobar here. Again, for you guys that are running Debian or Ubuntu-based systems, you would sudo apt install Xmobar. Now I'm having some problems here installing. It looks like I probably need to update my mirror list, so I'm going to pause the video and fix this. Okay, so I updated my machine and installed Xmobar. So let's try to launch Xmobar and see if we actually have it. So I'm going to type Xmobar here in the terminal. I'm going to hit enter. Now the terminal is taking up the full screen, so even if Xmobar is running, we can't see it. So I'm going to grab the terminal. I'm going to do an Alt and then left click on the mouse and move the screen a little bit. And you see behind it, I have this panel here. It says updating. Then here you have Linux and then today's date and the time. That is Xmobar. So it is running, but when I close the terminal here with Alt Shift C, Xmobar is going to go away, of course. So eventually what we need to do is we need to get into the Xmonad config and have it launch Xmobar on startup, and that'll fix that problem. Before I start messing around, configuring Xmonad, let's show you how it is out of the box, the default config. So I mentioned Alt Shift Enter gives us a terminal. So here is a terminal. I'm going to start htop in this terminal. So I'm just going to type htop, let htop run. Then I'm going to Alt Shift Enter again. I'm going to get a second terminal. I'm going to run some other program in it. It doesn't matter which one. How about Ranger, the Ranger file manager? I've already got it installed on this system from doing some of the other minimal window managers I've reviewed in this series. Then I'm going to Alt Shift Enter again, and I get a third terminal. Let's launch another terminal program. How about IRSSI? IRSSI. That is my IRC chat client. It runs in the terminal. So now I've got 3 different programs. Now the one that has the red border around it, that is the one with focus. So, to move the focus of the windows, you use the mod key, which in the default configuration, it's still Alt. Alt plus J. Well, let me make sure I'm actually in the virtual machine. Alt J moves the focus around. You see how the red border is moving around? K also moves it around in the opposite direction. So that is how you switch the focus around the windows. I know that red border against the kind of a peach or beige color background is kind of hard to see. But that is how you switch focus of the windows. Now mod Shift J and K. So mod Shift J actually will move the focus window around in the layout. So right now H-top has the focus. Watch what happens to H-top when I do Alt Shift J. Well, let me make sure. Got to get my mouse back in the virtual machine here. So Alt Shift J. See how now I'm moving H-top around wherever I want it in the layout. K moves it in the opposite direction. So mod J and K to move focus, mod Shift J and K to take that window that has focus and move it around in the layout. And speaking of layouts, let's see. I'm actually going to have to pull up the default key bindings because I'm not sure what the default binding to change the layout is. I usually map mine to mod key plus tab, but they have mod tab set to something else here. Let's see. Mod space rotates the layouts. So mod space, so Alt space on the keyboard, changes the layout. See, now we have a different layout. Instead of one panel taking up half the screen and then the other half, being tiled, now we have the top half for one program. And then if I keep opening windows, you see they'll be tiled in that bottom half. Let me close some of these. That's a few too many. Let me Alt space again to get a different layout. That is, of course, full screen layout, where a program takes up the full screen. It's sitting on top of the other programs that we have open. And back to, I think this is the default, Xmonad layout. This is the one I really like. One program takes up half the screen, and then the other half, each new window just tiles in that other half. So we can just keep opening them. They just always tile in that one half, and the main program that you have open takes up the other half. So I'm going to close all these windows, Alt Shift C. So closes all of them. And the run command was Alt P to do D menu. I'm going to launch Genie. And inside Genie, I'm going to go and open the default Xmonad config. The default config is found in a hidden folder inside your home folder called .xmonad. And inside .xmonad, you should have a file called xmonad.hs, HS for Haskell. When you first launch Xmonad, though, this folder is empty. This .xmonad folder does not have anything in it. So what we need to do, we need to find where the Xmonad default config lives on our system, because there is a default config. It's going to be somewhere in the root file system, and we need to find that default config and copy it over into the .xmonad directory. So I'm going to open a terminal, so Alt Shift Enter, and then I'm going to locate xmonad.hs, and there we have it. It's actually user/share/xmonad/man/xmonad.hs. There were actually two on my system, but this one here I pulled down from GitHub. This is one of my old configs. I'm going to ignore that one for now, but the one you're going to have on your system is going to be found in /user/share/xmonad/man/xmonad.hs. So I'm going to run this command to copy that xmonad.hs, and I'm going to save it, the copy, into my home folder .xmonad, the hidden directory, the .xmonad directory, and then xmonad.hs. And now let me close this. So Alt Shift C to close that terminal. Now let me go back to that hidden folder, the .xmonad folder in my home directory, And there you go. I have xmonad.hs in it. Now let's open that up in Genie, and this is our default Xmonad config. So the default Xmonad config is not the easiest thing in the world to read. I mean, you can kind of tell, like, these are the key bindings. It says key bindings. They left comments for us. But this is not as well laid out as, say, the default key bindings or the default config in something like Qtile, which I already reviewed. Of course, Qtile was written in Python. Python's a much easier programming language to kind of follow along with. Again, this is Haskell. And some of this stuff is kind of, difficult to grasp. But I'm just going to go through some of this, the default config, and change a few things that are kind of obvious. For example, my terminal equals xterm. I don't want my default terminal, the terminal that comes up when I do Alt-Shift-Enter, to be xterm. I don't like xterm. I like termite. So I'm going to change xterm to termite. Now my terminal should be termite once I restart Xmonad. But I'm not going to do that just yet because there's some other stuff I want to change. My mod mask equals mod1 mask. Mod1 is the alt key. I don't like using the alt key as my mod key. I like using the super key, the Windows key. So if I change my mod mask equals mod1 mask to mod4 mask, that will change the mod key to the super key. Now, let me make a comment here so I will remember that down the road. So I'm going to do 2 dashes, 2 hyphens, and change mod key to super key. There, that way I know that I changed that. Now I'm going to save xmonad.hs. And now we need to restart Xmonad for these changes to take effect. The default key binding to restart Xmonad is mod q. Since we have the config open, I could actually look through the config and find this. Let's see where it would be here in the config. Right here. Mod q. See this? This is the keyboard Q key. Then mod M here is the mod key. So Alt and Q, because this is the default key binding for mod still, because we haven't restarted yet. So Alt Q will run this command, xmonad -- recompile xmonad -- restart. So it will recompile Xmonad and then restart the Xmonad window manager. So Alt Q on the keyboard should have restarted Xmonad. Let's see. So instead of Alt-Shift-Enter, Super-Shift-Enter should give me a termite terminal now. And it does. So that worked. So we successfully changed the mod key from Alt to Super. We successfully changed our default terminal from Xterm to termite. Now we really need some kind of bar or panel. We installed Xmobar. How do we get Xmobar to launch on startup? Well, I'm at the top of the Xmonad config. I'm going to scroll all the way down. And somewhere in the default config, I will see main equals Xmonad defaults. I'm going to edit this in a pretty serious way. Before I make any changes, though, there is one more package we need to install in Xmonad. So I'm going to Super Shift Enter now because I changed the mod key to Super. Super Shift Enter. Oh, hold on just a second. I keep forgetting to have focus in the virtual machine. Super Shift Enter did something on my host machine. I almost messed something up there. You got to be careful sometimes playing around in these virtual machines. You think you're opening or closing programs on the virtual machine and you're killing stuff on your host machine. Anyway, so terminal sudo pacman -S xmonad -contrib contrib xmonad -contrib. This is a very important package. It's really not optional. So anytime you install Xmonad, you really need to install Xmonad -contrib. It is all the extra Haskell libraries, the Xmonad libraries, that are going to extend a lot of the functionality in Xmonad, some of the stuff you're going to want So we've got that installed. I'm going to close that terminal. Now I'm going to edit this in such a way that I will have Xmobar launch on startup. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy one of my old Xmonad configs, because I could spend hours actually configuring Xmonad, especially if you don't know Haskell. I mean, you could spend days or even weeks trying to get this thing set up the way you want it. So I'm just going to copy one of my old configs over, and then I'll show you some of what's changed in my config compared to the default config. The first thing you'll notice is the beginning of this config. I'm importing a million different Xmonad libraries into this thing. Again, this is some of that extra functionality that we needed from that package xmonad-contrib. Gives us some different utilities and hooks, actions, layouts. Here is another thing that differs. In the default config, you had main equals Xmonad defaults. Well, here I've got main equals do and then a million stuff behind it. This handles Xmobar. This is going to launch Xmobar. It's actually going to launch 3 instances of Xmobar on 3 different monitors because I have a triple monitor setup. Now in this VM, I'm only using 1 screen on this VM, but it won't matter. It'll just ignore the other instances of Xmobar. It won't launch them since there's no monitors going. I also went ahead and deleted the path to the Xmobar config that was in this because I have no Xmobar config on this machine other than the default one. So also you notice I have this little section here, auto start. Basically my startup hook equals do and then spawn once nitrogen -- restore. My wallpaper. Spawn once Compton and then the location to the Compton config file. That's going to launch the Compton compositor. And I've cleaned up the key bindings here in mine instead of the weird funny looking mod M and then XK_Q, for the letter Q on the keyboard. I've got mine set to more readable stuff. Capital M is the mod key. Capital C is the control key. Capital S is the shift key. And then the lowercase, of course, are your standard keys on the keyboard. And this is a lot more readable how I've got these key bindings laid out than how it's laid out in that default config. And I've got some workspace stuff. Layouts. I've got various layouts. Got the names of my workspaces. By default, the Xmonad config had 10 workspaces. They were numbered 0 through 9, I think. I have my workspaces named. I only have 6 of them, and I have them named main, web, text, chat, media, and syst for system. So I'm going to save this, and let's see if this actually works. This is a pretty old config. I haven't used this in a couple of years. So the mod key plus Q on the keyboard restarts. So okay. We didn't get a screen that came up saying we had any errors, so the config did work. It didn't crash anything because Haskell is very picky and Xmonad is very picky. If you make any kind of even the smallest mistake in this config file, you're going to have an X term pop up with a bunch of error messages. So you'll know when you config something wrong. Let me do super and 2 on the keypad to get to the second workspace. And yeah, we have wallpaper now. And we have Xmobar, but it's not working correctly. Again, I don't have any kind of config file for it yet. It says could not parse string and then a bunch of error stuff. We need to fix this. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a Xmobar RC file. Put that in our .config/Xmobar directory. You have to create that directory. This is kind of complicated, guys. Xmonad is not a simple window manager to install. But anyway, go to GitHub, find anybody's Xmobar RC file, and copy it. And that's exactly what I did. I created .xmobar RC. Then we need to save it. You need to save it in .config Xmobar. You have to create this directory. It won't be there. And then save that file as .xmobar.rc. And this is the Xmobar.rc. It basically tells you exactly what the layout of your Xmobar is. So this is Xmobar. Now we define the names of these workspaces in my Xmonad config. Remember, the first one was main, the second workspace is web, the third one, super 3, text, super 4 takes me to chat, super 5 super 5 takes me to media, super 6 takes me to system. Also, each of them are going to have a different layout by default. System has a 3-row layout. Super 5 takes me back to media. That has the monocle layout. Let me show you what those are. I'm just going to start opening terminals. Monocle, one big, the window takes up the whole screen. That is monocle. I just opened like 3 terminals, but they're all stacked one on top of each other. Let me close them. Closed all 3 of them. System, if I go back to system, super, and the 6 on the keyboard because it's the 6th workspace. The 3-row layout is what is set by default. So I'm going to open 3 terminals. 3-row is the name of this layout. All right, and if I go to super 4 for the 4th workspace, which is called chat, the layout for it, the default layout, is grid. So grid basically divides it exactly evenly in a grid. And of course, even though they have the default layout on the workspace, you can change them. I've got it set to super tab to change the layouts for the workspaces. So we can change the layouts, just whatever key binding you happen to have it set. I like super tab. You might like super space, something simple. Anyway. Back to the first workspace, super 1, takes me back to the first workspace. Let me close this web browser where I pulled down that Xmobar RC file. I don't need it anymore. And looking at this very heavily modified config again, just briefly go over it. I imported all these libraries. Where do you find these libraries? You find it in the documentation on xmonad.org. You go to xmonad.org to their documentation. A lot of the links actually link to Haskell.org. This is actually from Haskell.org, the Xmonad-contrib library. And it has all of these various libraries, such as xmonad.actions.afterdrag, yada, yada, yada. Very long list of libraries you can import. It tells you what they do. Anyway, I've imported a lot of these Xmonad libraries. Again, they add a lot of the functionality to my config here. You know, I have a lot of comments in my config too because I don't know Haskell. I left a lot of little reminders to let me know my mod mask equals mod 4 mask sets the mod key to super/Windows key. My terminal equals termite. That sets my default terminal. My text editor, yeah, I actually defined my default text editor here. I just called it editor, but I could change this to Genie, Vim, whatever. My border width equals 3. This is the width of the border around the windows. So the window that has focus has a 3-pixel border because by default I think it's only a 1-pixel border. It's a very tiny border. I like having the focus window have a little bit thicker border so it's obvious what window has the focus on the screen. Again, this main function here is basically what's happening on your screen. Basically, it launches your Xmobar too, or whatever panel you end up going with. I like Xmobar because it's kind of simple to use. The config file for Xmobar, this is it. Very simple. You can add and rearrange the little widgets in the panel, and you can change the colors or to whatever you happen to like. Pretty straightforward. Xmobar has no clicking functionality. You actually can't click like the workspaces and change anything. There are no clickable widgets. You don't use the mouse really in Xmonad. It's strictly keyboard driven for the most part. Near the bottom of my config, I have, again, the names of my workspaces laid out. And then I have I've defined the layouts for those workspaces. For example, let me go to show you my Xmobar again. The very first one, main, the second one, web, the third one is text. So my text layout right here, that defines that text layout. By default, the workspace the layout is called one big window. As I cycle through the layouts though, the next one would be 3 column, the next one would be 3 row, the next one would be grid. So you can change how each workspace is laid out, and how each layout, the number of layouts, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is the order of the layouts. So I can have workspace 1 have the grid layout as default, and then when I Alt-Tab to go to the next layout, it'll be one big window layout. But on another workspace, I can have one big window layout as the default, and then when I Alt-Tab, it goes to the grid layout, or a floating layout, or whatever. Very customizable. Again, though, you do have to know a little bit of how Haskell works. So, what I've got so far using one of my old configs, let me just open a few programs that I have hotkeyed from the config. So, there's Ursi, there's HTOP. Let's see what else I've got here. That looks like maybe the Lynx web browser. It is. Of course, we could, view the web here. 3 programs open. I can toggle through my layouts here. Of course, I can resize a window. And put everything back the way I found it. I can move a window to a different workspace. I'm on workspace 1, the main workspace, since the Lynx web browser here has the focus, Super Shift and 2, because of the way I have my layout or my key binding set, should take it to the second workspace. So now it's gone. It's on the second workspace. If I do Super 2 to get to the second workspace, the Lynx web browser is there. Super 1 back to the first workspace. You see HTOP and Ursi are still here on the first workspace. If I want to send HTOP to the second workspace, Super Shift 2 takes it over to the second workspace. Super Shift 2 takes Ursi to the second workspace. Let me move to the second workspace, Super 2. They're all here. I can change the layout. I can close. Super Shift C is what I've got the close button to, and Super Shift Q quits Xmonad entirely and takes me back to the LightDM login manager. Anyway, that's a very, very quick and kind of crude look at Xmonad. Xmonad is kind of a tough one to do. Really, to do a proper review of Xmonad, you kind of have to do a Haskell tutorial. I'm not a Haskell programmer, and even if I was, I would probably have to do a series of videos on Haskell just to, really break down the code and everything you could do in Xmonad. I can't do that on the channel, but I think this serves as a good base for Xmonad. Let me launch Xmonad again. Let me log back in. What I suggest you guys do is do the same thing I did when I was first learning Xmonad. Go find somebody else's config file, pull it down, install it on your system, play with it, read the documentation, read xmonad.org and haskell.org, read the man page for Xmonad, and then for those of you interested in learning Haskell, just open up all the Xmonad files, the various files. Xmonad is not a very large program. You can actually sit down and pretty much read all the Xmonad libraries if you're really that interested in Haskell. I'm not. So what I suggest, pull down somebody else's config. There's a million Xmonad configs out there on GitHub. Xmonad is a very popular tiling window manager. And start with that and, just hack away on it. It may take you a few days, probably a few weeks to really set up Xmonad the way you like it. But it is a rewarding experience. In a lot of ways, Xmonad is, in my opinion, the best tiling window manager out there as far as functionality, especially dealing with multi-monitors, which I'm not doing today. I'm only using one monitor for this virtual machine. The other thing is Xmonad is stable. It's been around forever. It doesn't change a lot. You're not going to suddenly get a Xmonad update or a Haskell update and it breaks all your configs. Some tiling window managers, that can be the case. I know many years ago when I used to run Awesome, it seemed like every time Awesome Window Manager updated, they had some new libraries and some new syntax, and your old config no longer worked. You have to rewrite your Awesome Window Manager config. I've never had to do that in Xmonad. Things just work. It's stable. So check out Xmonad, guys. Peace.